This was a solid episode. It really was. It's kind of refreshing to see after a big alliance gets together that it doesn't immediately break up, at least in the modern era of Survivor. That's kind of refreshing because, in the past, especially in old school Survivor, that was almost like the bane of, like, a telltale sign of a bad season was when you have a huge alliance kind of steamrolls. Well, no, we don't really see huge alliances. Actually, that's the problem. Traditionally, is that just the tribe stays together, and they just outnumber the tribe and steamroll that. And so this is a unique circumstance, but also it's just refreshing to see them stick together because it's so normal in modern Survivor and super uber modern Survivor for the alliances to just flip any given week. Who's the new threat? Just wherever you need to go, because it's kind of encouraged. That kind of gameplay is kind of encouraged nowadays. But it's cool to see actual strong alliance formed like this. And the debate was ultimately down to which of the outside members to take out, whether it was going to be ultimately Chanel or Romeo. Tori was the first instinct again, and again she won individual immunity, so she sneaks by. It could be one of those cases of you sneak by a couple times and suddenly you're there at the end game, where, Erica, by virtue of the hourglass last season, would have, as far as we know, would have been voted out at that merge episode. And just by the virtue of that hourglass, she got by that week, and then that's all she needed to actually just slip under the radar and was not up for consideration at all for a while there. So it could have a similar thing here, though it's been 2 weeks now that she's been up for consideration, and it's been immunity both times that saved her. So now it could not only be that she's outside of the alliance, but also could be an immunity threat as well to consider. So that's definitely a different circumstance, but who knows exactly. Romeo was upset that Drea left him out, and Drea just seems very cold and calculated. She's like, he's too paranoid, and if I need to get rid of him, I need to get rid of him. That's all there is to it. It was like a question mark in a lot of people's minds why exactly Drea didn't bring Romeo up, because it seemed like they were closer than maybe even Roxroy, but she did name drop Roxroy and got him into the alliance and not Romeo. So it's interesting. You don't see the full dynamic there, so it could be that idea of him being a paranoid player that made her hesitant to bring him in. It's cool getting these more character moments, like seeing again how Mike's a great guy and he's actually expressing some curiosity over Omar's religion. That's nice to see. Mike is becoming more and more endearing, and you obviously want to hold on to it. Hopefully we get it for a long haul, and it's not like, we need to use all the Mike material we have while we still can, but I'd love to see him make a long run at it. In the same vein of Romeo being upset with Drea, Chanel was also upset with Hai for leaving her out, because seemingly the relationship wasn't as strong as that is of Drea's and Romeo's, but they were obviously still from the initial tribe, and she probably trusted him more than most people out there. Now, Jeff presents to us that the Beware advantage is going to be hidden in the same bench spot from season 41. And he's like, I'm going to be disappointed if we don't get it this time. As if it's like a different... He says this as if like they should know better now, but they really shouldn't. It's in the same spot. Same exact circumstances, pretty much. So it just as likely could have not been found as it could have been found last season, I'll see why he would be especially disappointed this time. I guess 2 times, but like you said, you're running the simulation in the idea that they haven't seen the season 41. So, but when Drea switched out for Marianne got that gray rock, and then Drea volunteered to switch out. I thought it was going to be like it was a strategic thing. She's the advantage queen. She just wanted a chance at an advantage, but. In the confessional, you see that she actually just didn't like peanut butter and jelly. That was the truth, and she just happened upon this advantage. She took a look and it was there. But she really is the advantage queen. She was sporting all of her different merchandise at the end there, kind of like Dean at the end of Island of the Idols. We'll see how that pans out for her. I loved this challenge because it was such an interesting dynamic. Omar was killing it with the shooting part of it. Omar was killing it, making shot after shot. And it was funny because you could almost hear like there was an undertone of like a Jonathan theme emerging as he came out and made his presence known. And it was like Jonathan is inevitable. He came out, nailed every shot in a row. Omar just could not secure the last shot before he got all the shots he needed and won the challenge. It's crazy. I love Jonathan's presence just for that alone. And you can see he strives in the challenge or the team challenges, especially. You know, whenever he's on a team, he's gonna win it for them. It seems. And I thought it might be exclusive just to that. Kind of like Rupert in many of his challenges in Pearl Islands and that similar thing. But you saw it came down to a showdown between him and Tori for the individual immunity challenge too. So he could definitely be a threat, especially if they get Tori out for those as well. So hopefully we get to see more of his skills on display. I thought it was so interesting how Omar mentioned how he can play both sides of the fence because of the fact he had no vote at the last tribal. He can claim to be left out of the vote, and be buddy with the people on the outs while also actually knowing what's going on. So he gets full knowledge of the game at this point. We'll see if that can backfire on him at some point. Who knows? Okay, so Drea gets this knowledge as power advantage, but they claimed it was a beware advantage again. It seems the only beware part of it is that you have to pick it up and it was covered in red paint. And so it's like, oh, how are you gonna explain that? But really, she like washed up pretty quickly in the water, and I feel like she could have just done a little bit more washing and it would have been completely gone. Maybe producer was like, okay, you have to have some red paint on you to explain. But I was like, there's no way this is like a fake risk. Like, there's no real risk here. What's gonna happen? But somehow Tori actually picks up on that. So good on Tori. She actually sussed out when she saw Drea with the red paint and saw she was acting weird, and noticed something in her pants. So she noticed actually that she has something straight up. And so now it's up to whether she can do anything with it. If she didn't win that immunity, it would have been interesting if she tried to wield that information against her, because otherwise she could have just gone home with that info. And then it came down to the rice negotiation thing, similarly to last season, where ultimately we get Lindsay, Marianne, Drea, and Omar sitting out for rice so that everyone can get rice. And it's interesting, Marianne was like crying, pleading with them, please step down for rice, because she knows she's in a position where if she doesn't she doesn't have a chance at immunity, and she might actually go home because of it. She's pleading with them, and then in confessional she's like, oh, look at me using my emotions actually as a strategy in the game. So that was pretty cool, and actually it worked out because it seemed like everybody had this unspoken or maybe actually spoken agreement to not vote out anyone who sat out for everybody to get rice. So that took Lindsay, Marianne, Drea, and Omar off the table. In reality, Marianne was kind of the one more on the outs out of anyone in there, so she would have been the one most at risk. She was right in that. But otherwise, like, they knew they had options, so that's fair enough. A nice human gesture to not vote out the person who sat out to give you rice. You know, that's cool. So Tori wins that and throws another wrench in it, but which made for a much more interesting. I mean, it made for a much more interesting episode last time, and it made for a little more interesting episode this time because it still was out of the people outside of the alliance, but it still was more interesting, I think, than what we would have had. Chanel is the clear target, and everyone's in on it, but Romeo is becoming paranoid and is essentially switching the target on himself. Hai wants to switch to Romeo as a result of how he's like being crazy. Now they're acting like it's unreasonable for him to be paranoid, and even if it backfired ultimately, and Romeo got himself actually voted out this episode, I wouldn't have been too hard on him. I think it's completely fair in his position to do something like this. Like, it's not like he's wrong and he's like in a secure alliance or anything. If he's wrong in his sus, and he is wrong that he is the one being voted out tonight, and he gets himself to go home because he's playing too hard or whatever, being paranoid, he's only like off by 1 or 2 votes, right? If you actually look at the pecking order, he's still next up on the chopping block probably, and it seems like he was, either him or Tori would have been next anyway. So it's not unreasonable for him to think that, because it's not like, oh, we told you a name, why are you freaking out? It's like, yeah, you told me a name and I have no power whatsoever, so I'm just at your mercy. So obviously you shouldn't feel secure in that. So I don't blame him for that. It's not like, oh man, he's a weak, a paranoid player. I don't feel that at all, but he just finds himself in a tough spot. I could definitely see him turning this around and maneuvering into a better position. I have a little less faith after this episode from seeing people's reactions to it, because they seem to be more adamant now that, okay, he's a paranoid player, he's sketchy, so they might be more akin to vote him out than they would have previously. But we'll see how it goes. I loved this last minute push from Mike, seeing some actual Mike like saying he wants to push the issue and get everyone to stick to Chanel when he saw them trying to turn the tide against Romeo instead. He was like, no, I want Chanel. And for him, it's personal because of her voting for him way back when. So I love that Mike got revenge specifically for that. So Chanel can look back and say that's literally what cost her the game, was voting Mike in that spot. You don't turn on Mike, that's what happens. I love that. It was cool seeing Mike actually trying to push the issue, not just be nice guy, go along with the ride, likable guy kind of thing. He's like, there's more depth to him, and he showed it there. That was cool. Loving Mike more and more every episode. Please give me more Mike. I actually legitimately fear that the idol will be his undoing. That whereas otherwise he might be able to have a longer run, people will inevitably, as they're whittling down the numbers, that's going to come up and be like, well, he's not expecting it, and he's got an idol, so let's get him now. That combined with his likability factor, it could be dangerous against him. I don't know. Maybe there's a position where like he's got an alliance member who will clue him in on it, and they could do something cool. I'm hoping Mike would be an iconic winner, but I don't have my hopes up that much. Chanel gets voted out. Ultimately, the votes against Chanel were Hai, Mike, Jonathan, Lindsay, Tori, Roxroy, and Drea. And the votes against Romeo were Marianne, Omar, and Lindsay. Now, that's what's interesting is those three are actually all from the same previous tribe. Everyone but Jonathan voted for Romeo. Now, I have to imagine at least Omar and Lindsay were clued in on it. So it seemed everybody was on board at this point. And then Romeo votes for Hai. I don't know if he's just being petty or what, but he threw that vote out there. So I'd like to know if any of these people were outside of the vote or if it was part of a split plan. I don't know, in case of an idol. But, what's interesting is they announced in the preview 2 people win immunity and 2 people are going home in the next episode. So that should be exciting. Now, Jeff is not telling us 2 people are going home. Jeff told them in the preview that 2 people are going home tonight. So, which it makes me think they're probably doing the thing where you split into 2 tribes temporarily and do 2 separate tribal councils. I don't see otherwise. If they do iconic first time ever vote 2 people out in the same tribal council. Messy. Imagine everybody gets 2 votes. How messy that would be. But maybe it would be interesting if you do a tribal council, vote somebody out, and as soon as that person walks out, then it's another tribal council. That might be interesting and a little twist, different than the expected, like split into 2 tribes and do that. So that can be fun. It can also be a little bit of BS in the mix, but Survivor always has a little BS involved. I just don't want to see like some crazy scenario where Mike or Jonathan are like the obvious like left out. But when you split up the 2 tribes, that often favors the majority. If you have this huge alliance, it should win out. It should win the day, unless all the minority are on one of the tribes, whatever. That'll be interesting to see play out. I'm sure it'll be fun, regardless. All right, that's it for that episode. I really enjoyed it. I did. Even though it's like, on paper, it's not the most interesting. Chanel, I'm glad to see her go, only that because I feel like she offered as much as she was going to for the game. She had run out of all agency, but she added some fun to the pre-merge, so I'm fine with her going out in the spot. But yeah, on paper, it doesn't seem like an interesting vote. It was an expected outcome, but how we got there and everything, the dynamic of Mike like trying to reel it back in. That was really cool and fun to watch. So, yeah. See you next time. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell for more. We're currently going through Survivor Guatemala as well. If you're into old school Survivor, I'm taking my friend through that for the first time. That's going to be fun every week. And we're also doing movie reviews, discussions, other things. We review a lot of stuff and talk about a lot of stuff. We're going to be having a lot of fun here. All right. Check out, if you enjoyed this video, actually check out the one we just posted very recently, the premiere of Survivor Guatemala. Check that out, our reaction to that. Yeah. Thank you.